Greetings! In this video in the series The Real Cost of Illness, the True Value of Health, I want to talk about why we can sometimes put off getting well. Now, I know that sounds completely counterintuitive, but this is what I see all the time as a therapist. And I see this in other areas of life as well. For example, we can put off eating well, we can put off exercising, we can put off getting help with our accounts, we can put off a lot of things, and it's part of human nature to do this. And I want to go through some of the key reasons, and usually these are quite unconscious reasons, as to why, even though we don't want to be unwell, we don't want to have symptoms, we don't want to feel ill, we don't want to feel discomfort and all that horrible stuff, even though we don't want it, we unconsciously perpetuate it. And what happens as a result is that we stay ill longer, we can get even sicker, and we just compromise our health until we really do something about it. So as I said, it can seem crazy that we can delay getting well, and yet we often do this. So reason number one, we don't realize we have to do something. So what is really interesting is that sometimes we don't really recognize that we have a problem, because the human body is incredibly resilient, and also the human mind can also be quite unaware. So I'll give you an example. Many years ago, when I was living in London, I was cleaning my windows in my flat one day, and I somehow twisted my back. And I'd never hurt my back before, ever. So I wasn't quite sure what had happened. I knew that I'd felt something twist and tweak in my back, but I really had no idea what I'd done. And although it felt stiff, it really wasn't that bad. But over the next few months, I started to notice that my range of motion had reduced and I was getting progressively, slowly stiffer. And then one day I was leaning over, this is about 3 months later, I was leaning over trying to put my sock on. And I realized that I just couldn't put my sock on. And I thought, this can't be right. You know, somehow or other, or, you know, I now can't put my sock on. So what's going on here? You know, maybe it's time that I sought some help for whatever is going on with my back. So I had spent 3 months with an injury, but because it wasn't really totally debilitating, it was just slightly inconvenient, slightly painful, I had not really thought to do anything about it. And one of the other reasons, which we'll come to as well in a moment, is that I didn't know what to do or who to go to. I knew that the doctor wasn't going to be able to help, and back then the only thing up until that point that I'd ever heard of, or the only person that I knew to go to, was a doctor. So I just had no point of reference as to, well, who do I see? And I didn't know who to ask of my friends, so I didn't do anything about it. But when it got to the point where the pain was bad enough and the discomfort and disability of not being able to put my socks on was bad enough, then I decided, okay, I need to do something about this. And so I found my way to an osteopath. And the first thing that he said to me was, you should have come to see me as soon as possible, because now you've started to compensate, your body started to compensate, it's started to readjust itself into this not so good position, and so it's going to take longer to get well. So that is a really good metaphor for what actually really happens. Whatever the problem is, the longer we leave it, the longer it can take to get well. So the first reason that we don't do anything about an illness is that we don't actually realize that we need to do something. We're just unaware of what is going on physically in our body. There's this unawareness. Reason number two, we don't know that we're putting it off. So this is connected to reason number one, slightly different. We don't know what we don't know. We don't know we're not getting the right useful information, and we may think we're doing the right thing. So we just don't know that we're putting off the inevitable. Again, this comes back to unawareness. Reason number three, often we can think it will get better by itself. We think that whatever we're experiencing will go away by itself. So again, another real life example here. Over a period of 9 months, I started to get more and more tired. And I kept on thinking, well, if I get a good night's sleep, if I get some good rest this weekend, if I go away on holiday, if I do this, if I do that, I'll be okay. But the fatigue wasn't going away. And in fact, it was getting worse, progressively, slowly worse. And this fatigue built up over a period of 9 months until one day I walked into work and spontaneously quit my job. I had no intention of quitting my job that day, but I just walked in and I thought, I cannot come into work anymore. I cannot put one foot in front of the other anymore. I'm absolutely exhausted, and the only thing I can think of doing is quitting my job. So this was a classic example of thinking it's going to get better by itself, it's going to go away. But there are some health conditions where this is not going to happen. And the reason it's not going to happen is that until we identify the root cause and resolve it, the symptoms are going to stay there, because the symptoms are trying to tell us something. Initially, they're an early warning signal, but when they continue, they're there to give us a message. Now, in my Kiwi Health Detective breakthrough session, we work out what that message is. We get clarity on the meaning behind the symptoms. So if you have a chronic ongoing illness, and it could be something like fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, irritable bowel syndrome, or it could be a sore shoulder or a sore arm or a sore rib that just won't go away. This is a sign that your body is trying to tell you something and you're not getting the message yet. So until we get the message and we resolve whatever the situation is, the body will continue to send symptoms because it's intelligently programmed to do that. The fourth message is we just put up with it. We just put up with it. And for example, in New Zealand, there's a phrase that says, she'll be all right, mate. You just put up with it. And a lot of people will say things like, well, you just battle on, you just get on with it. You just get on with your life. So there's this ignoring of the symptoms and a pushing through using the mind, or even using the mind to ignore the symptoms. Again, the example of the back pain, I put up with it and I ignored it for 3 months until it got to the point where my back quite clearly said to me, you can't ignore this anymore, you need to do something about it. Reason number 5, we don't realize how bad it is. We actually don't realize the reality of how bad the physical injury or sickness is, because often and usually it will worsen very, very slowly over time, and we get used to it over time. And we start to unconsciously compensate for the pain. Now, this in a way is part of human nature, because say, for example, you were out in the wild as a wild wolf or something like that, you may have to get used to it and compensate, and as human beings tend to say, live with it. But actually, that's not how it's meant to be. If we have symptoms, especially of chronic illness and chronic ongoing symptoms, there's almost always a message there, something that we need to decipher and work out and resolve, maybe change, amend. Something has to be done. And when we do that, the body self-rectifies and self-heals because it's an auto-regulating mechanism. So this reason is all about, well, we don't realize how bad it is, so we just put up with it. Reason number 6, I mentioned it before, we don't know where to go for help. We just don't know that there are other options. We don't know who to ask, either professionals to ask or friends or colleagues or family. We just simply don't know where to go. So, for example, I've been having recently some problems, not major problems, but just little niggly things with my computer. But I didn't know where to find somebody who was local, who I could trust to ask for help. My previous computer guy seems to have disappeared off the planet, and I didn't know where to go. I mean, I knew that I could Google, and but somehow I wasn't doing that because I wanted somebody that I could trust. And this is a big issue, by the way, in terms of anything, but in particular for health and healing, is that we must feel that we can trust the person. For healing to happen, we need to feel safe. It's very important that we feel physically, mentally, emotionally safe. But anyway, I didn't know where to go. But in the end, I put a call out and I actually put a post on Facebook and said, hey, can anybody recommend a computer guy in my area? And I got a few recommendations and spoke with one of the people. They came out, and in 5 minutes, he'd sorted these little niggly problems. But if we don't know where to go or who to turn to for help, we stay unconsciously stuck and we don't take action. Reason number 7, we're limited by our current understanding of health and wellness and well-being. We are limited by what choices we know or think are out there. So for example, when I had my back problem, up until that point, I only knew that you went to the doctor if you had a problem. I'd never heard of an osteopath or an acupuncturist or a natural energy healer or a naturopath. Nothing. Never heard of one other natural healing person. Remember, this is like 35 years ago. So when we're stuck in a paradigm of healthcare, which means we have a certain reality around what is available, we actually have no idea of the true variety of healthcare methods and choices that are in reality available. Now, I've done some searches over the years on, what natural healthcare methods are available. I've personally tried over 220 therapies myself. That is a lot of therapies. I've trained professionally in over 20 therapies. But even so, that is nothing compared to the total number of therapies that are available. And I'm not sure if we could number it in maybe 1,000, 1,500, 2,000. I'm not sure. But the fact is, there are hundreds of different healthcare approaches that are available. Now, I actually talk a little bit about this in my Which Healthcare Model is Right for Me free program. So if you want to check that out, go and check out that free program. It's called Which Healthcare is Right for Me. And that will allow you to understand these different levels of healthcare that are available and that are available depending on our open-mindedness to see what is out there. Reason number 8, we can be limited by our beliefs. Without even realizing it, we can limit our healthcare choices and what we actually find as far as options as a result of our unconscious beliefs. And these can actually be tied to our religious beliefs. So for example, I've worked with people from certain religious backgrounds where their beliefs have prevented them from being open to the solutions that I have offered, which has been such a shame because everything I teach has nothing to do with religion at all. It's just about human nature and the human body, and that supersedes any religion. But I have observed that some people can be limited in their healthcare choices unconsciously by their religious beliefs. Number 9, we can be really confused by the number of choices. So on the one hand, you may not know of many choices, But on the other hand, when you do start searching for other options that sit outside the conventional medical system, and you try lots of things and then they don't work, then you can start to get confused. And I totally understand this because that's what happened to me. I tried 140 therapies and I still hadn't made any progress. I tried all sorts of different things and yet nothing was working. So what happens when that happens and we've tried lots of different things and we feel like we're wasting our money is that we start to think, well, nothing's going to work, so why should I try something else? And we start to get demoralized. And then we stay stuck. We stop doing anything about it. And that can delay our getting well. Number 10, we can have unconscious reasons for not getting well. Now, I know this sounds crazy, but it's really true. We can, on the one hand, say, I want to be well, I don't want to be feeling ill, I want to get rid of my symptoms, etc., etc. Now, that's what we're saying consciously. But our unconscious mind is this huge supercomputer, which is about 90% of our mind. There's only 10% which is actually conscious, and 90% is unconscious. And in the unconscious, we can have some conflicting beliefs. And these beliefs are unconsciously keeping us ill or stuck or not taking action. So, for example, we can ask ourselves, well, what would I lose or have to give up by getting well? So if we give an example here, say you're in a relationship and you're being taken care of by your partner because you're sick, and it's the first time really in your whole life that you've ever received any proper, loving, positive attention, you would have to give up, perhaps, having that attention if you were to get well. And so unconsciously, we could keep ourselves sick because unconsciously, we don't want to give up that secondary gain. Or we could ask ourselves, what are we gaining by staying ill? So for example, say you really hate your job and you're sick, which means you don't have to go back to work, then staying sick means that you don't have to go back to that job that you don't like. Now, these are really simple examples of some secondary gains or unconscious gains. Usually they're more complex than this, but it gives you the idea of how secondary gain works. And this is a very, very common reason for not taking action to get well. Reason number 11, unconscious low self-value. So if we unconsciously feel that we don't deserve happiness, health, success, freedom, abundance, and all the good things that we keep saying we want, we may keep ourselves ill. Because if we were to be well and healthy, then by default we'd have to be happy and successful and get all the things that we say we want in life. So this is very common with the type of person that I tend to work with, because I tend to work with people who've experienced quite severe emotional neglect or emotional abuse in their childhood. And they may not even realize that's happened until we start working together, because we can have huge denial of what has happened in our past, and the huge denial ties into the previous reason of secondary gain. But what happens is when we grow up in an environment where our emotional needs are not met, where we're not encouraged, we're not loved, and instead we receive criticism, punishment, humiliation, put downs, even abuse, this creates rock bottom self-value and self-worth, and deep, deep feelings of, well, I don't deserve to be happy, I don't deserve to live. So these deep beliefs can unconsciously keep us stuck. They're actually what got us sick in the first place, and then they keep us sick. So we have to dig these out, which is what we do when we work together. And the 12th reason, which is very common, is I can't afford it. So often we think that we can't afford the help because we're only looking at the small picture of what we're going to be spending now. But we're not looking at the bigger picture of how our life will be impacted if we don't get that help and get it as soon as possible. We're not looking at the impact it's going to have on our health and well-being not to be well, on our ability to function in life, on our ability to enjoy life, on our ability to enjoy our relationships, to work, to earn money, and many other reasons. And as I've discovered, actually we can't afford not to get help. And as you will see in the rest of this series, I go into deep detail into, well, what are the financial consequences, the relationship consequences, the true healthcare cost consequences of not getting the right help as soon as possible. So this is why I'm so passionate about helping people understand the true cost of illness and the true value of health. So I look forward to seeing you in the other videos.